9:17 a.m. A caliche service road outside Winslow, Arizona. 11 federal agents moved from 3 directions through the high desert light, each position marked on a laminated grid taped to the team leader's forearm. The structure at the end of the road was a boarded double-wide mobile home. No registered occupant. No active utilities. The nearest building 4/10 of a mile away. The ram went into the rear bedroom door. Inside, on the floor of a stripped bedroom, a 6-day-old infant lay in a laundry basket, wrapped in a fleece blanket with a small repeating bear print pattern. Dehydrated. Alive. The case had broken in under 9 hours. Of the 23 law enforcement personnel working it, only 3 knew exactly how. This is where the story ends. Here is where it began. The drive from Crestfield Loop in Surprise, Arizona, to the Caliche Road outside Winslow runs 189 miles on the interstate. At 2:40 in the morning, with no traffic on State Route 60 and the desert dark on both sides of the pavement, it takes approximately 2 hours and 12 minutes. Between those 2 points there is open Sonoran country, a dozen exits that lead to nothing, and 1 truck stop at mile marker 204, where a single decision made by a woman with no law enforcement training changed the outcome of this case. That part comes later. First, the beginning. On the morning of August 1st, 2026, Maya Reeves drove home from the Banner Desert Medical Center in Mesa, Arizona, with her newborn son in the back seat. The drive was 26 minutes. Her mother, Donna Reeves, rode with her and helped carry the infant carrier up the 3 front porch steps of the single-story rental they shared on Crestfield Loop in the West Valley suburb of Surprise. The baby had been born 6 days earlier at 39 weeks. He weighed 6 pounds and 11 ounces. He had been discharged that morning following standard post-birth monitoring. Maya was 23 years old. She worked part-time at a dental practice in Glendale. She had grown up in Phoenix, attended community college, and was, by every account of the people who knew her, someone who organized her life with care, her finances, her medical appointments, the small savings account she had built toward eventually buying her own place. She had prepared for the baby the same way. The nursery finished 4 weeks early, the pediatrician selected before the 3rd trimester, the car seat inspected at a fire station. The nursery was the smallest bedroom in the house, the one facing the front yard, with the window that looked directly across Crestfield Loop. It had taken Maya 2 weekends in early July to finish. Soft yellow walls she had rolled herself, a second-hand crib she had sanded and repainted white, a fabric mobile her co-worker at the dental practice had made as a shower gift. The room was orderly in the way that first-time parents make things orderly. Every item in its designated place. The diaper caddy stocked with 3 days of supplies. The monitor mounted above the crib. The sound machine set to white noise at a volume she had tested across 3 different positions in the room to confirm the crib was within range. She had been home 6 hours when she put him down for the first time in the crib she had prepared for him. She had been home 8 hours when Donna left for her overnight shift. She had been home 11 hours and 47 minutes when she was awakened by movement in the room. The man across the street had been watching her for 61 days. In early June of 2026, a man named Darren Coyle signed a 6-month lease on a second-floor corner unit at the Saguaro Ridge Apartments on the north side of Crestfield Loop. The unit's south-facing windows had an unobstructed sightline directly across the street. Coyle was 44 years old. He listed himself as an independent contractor. He paid the first 2 months in cash. He had 1 prior arrest, a criminal trespass charge in New Mexico 7 years earlier, dismissed without prejudice, and nothing else in any state criminal database that would have flagged a residential rental background check. He passed. He moved in. The building manager later described him as quiet, polite, and unremarkable. Before Coyle ever signed that lease, he had already been watching the house for 14 days. The mechanism he used was not a hacking tool, not a dark web service, not anything that required circumventing a legal or technological barrier. It was a listing platform, a consumer product. Platforms of this type had been designed to allow property owners and landlords to market residential space by posting camera footage of the interior and exterior, nanny cams, doorbell units, common area feeds, as evidence of the property's condition and amenities. The legal framework governing who could post this footage, how long it could be stored, and who could access it was minimal at the federal level and inconsistently applied at the state level. The platform had tens of thousands of active listings. Its archive retained deactivated listings indefinitely, unless the original poster requested deletion. A subletting tenant, 2 houses east of the Reeves home, had posted a listing in the spring, including a feed from an interior corridor camera that captured the shared driveway at an angle. In the background of that feed, during daylight hours, the east-facing window of the Reeves home was partially visible. The listing had since been deactivated. The subletting tenant had moved out, but the feed archive remained indexed. It was accessible through a keyword search of the block address. Coyle had found it from a motel room in Flagstaff. He had been accessing the archive since late May. By the time he signed his lease on June 14th, he had spent approximately 32 hours reviewing the rolling footage and cross-referencing it with Maya Reeves's public social media profile. He knew that Donna Reeves worked overnight shifts on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at a distribution center in Goodyear. He knew Maya's prenatal appointment schedule. He knew that the household dog was walked twice daily through the rear yard gate and that the rear sliding glass door was often left unlocked to allow the dog access during evening hours. What the platform's access logs showed, and what federal investigators reconstructed with precision once they had those records, was the sequence and duration of Coyle's review sessions. In a 30-day window in May and early June, he accessed the archived feed 37 times. The sessions averaged 53 minutes. He accessed the feed most frequently on weekday evenings between 8 and 11 p.m., which corresponded with the window when the east-facing corridor camera had the clearest view of the Reeves home's front-facing rooms. He did not download the footage. The platform's architecture did not permit direct download without an active premium subscription tied to a verified property owner, but he could scrub through the archive timestamp by timestamp, and the access logs showed exactly which timestamps he returned to most often. Investigators cross-referencing those timestamps with Maya Reeves's public social media posts found a consistent pattern. Every session in which Coyle spent more than 45 minutes on the platform corresponded with a window in which Maya had posted a story or a photograph to her account within the preceding 24 hours. The posts were not specific about schedules or interior layouts. They were what most people post: a dinner she had made, a walk in a park near the house, a photograph of the finished nursery with no room number or directional context. But each post confirmed her presence, her routine, her ongoing proximity to the house. 47 days of direct observation from the apartment across the street, combined with 14 days of remote access before moving in, totaled 61 days of continuous surveillance before he entered the home. Federal investigators would later describe this as the feature that most sharply distinguished the case from a crime of opportunity. It was methodical. Every tool used to plan it was consumer-grade, legally accessible, and monetized. On the night of August 1st, Donna Reeves called home at 10:55 p.m. to say goodnight before her overnight shift. Maya answered. The baby was asleep. Donna drove to the distribution center in Goodyear. Coyle had been waiting. At 2:47 a.m. on August 2nd, a neighbor, 2 doors east of the Reeves home, called 911. She had been awake with a sick toddler. She had gone to the kitchen for water and heard a car door close on the street below. Through the kitchen window, she saw a figure moving with purpose from the direction of the Reeves home toward a dark-colored SUV parked at the far end of the cul-de-sac. The figure was carrying something against the chest. Something small. The figure moved to the driver's side door, not the rear passenger door. She called immediately. She described exactly what she saw. No interpretation. Just the sequence. Surprise police department units arrived in 4 minutes. They found the front door of the Reeves home standing open. Maya Reeves was on the nursery floor, her wrists bound behind her with black plastic electrical cable ties. She was conscious. She had minor bruising to her left wrist, where the restraint had been applied tightly. She told officers that she had awakened to movement in the room, that a man she did not recognize had restrained her wrists and left the room carrying her son, and that the rear sliding door had been left unlocked to allow the dog access to the yard. The entire incident, from the moment she woke to the moment the man left, had lasted less than 4 minutes. She told investigators, in her first formal statement given to a surprise PD detective at 4:18 a.m., still in the nursery, still in the clothes she had slept in, the cable ties removed but the marks on her wrists still visible, that the man had not spoken. Not one word. She had looked at his face for a period of time she estimated at between 4 and 7 seconds, under the nursery's ceiling light, which she had left on at low intensity as a nightlight. She described the look on his face as focused. Not angry, not agitated. Focused. As though he was working through a sequence he had run through before. That detail, that the person who did this had rehearsed it sufficiently to execute it in silence, in 4 minutes, without deviation from a plan, was in the first formal statement. The detective who took that statement flagged it in his field notes at 4:22 a.m. as indicative of premeditation requiring advanced knowledge of the location and the occupants' schedules. The surprise police department escalated immediately to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and transmitted a preliminary Amber Alert request to the Arizona Department of Public Safety. The FBI Phoenix Field Office received notification at 3:22 a.m. under the mandatory federal kidnapping notification protocol for cases involving a minor. The U.S. Marshals Service Sonoran Fugitive Task Force was routed in 11 minutes after that, based on the assessed likelihood of interstate transport. By 3:40 a.m., 23 law enforcement personnel across 4 agencies were active on the case, and they had almost nothing to follow. The cul-de-sac's only security camera, a doorbell unit at the corner property, had gone offline after its previous tenant vacated 2 months prior. The building camera at Saguaro Ridge recorded a dark-colored SUV, possibly a Chevy or GMC, exiting the parking lot at 2:41 a.m. The plate was obscured by the approach angle. Coyle's apartment, accessed with a key obtained from the building manager at 3:55 a.m., was clean. Refrigerator empty and wiped down. Closets bare. No paperwork, no personal effects, no electronics. He had moved his belongings out in stages over the preceding 10 days, piece by piece, leaving only the furniture that came with the unit. He had planned the exit as carefully as he had planned everything else. The forensics team that processed the apartment beginning at 4:30 a.m. spent 6 hours documenting what was not there. No latent prints on the kitchen surfaces. Every hard surface had been wiped with a product consistent with isopropyl alcohol, based on the residue detected on the refrigerator handle. No fibers on the carpeted bedroom floor that could not be accounted for by the unit's inventory furniture. In the closets, adhesive residue on the upper rod indicated hangers had been removed and the rod wiped. In the bathroom, the medicine cabinet mirror had been cleaned so thoroughly that the forensic examiner noted, in the case file, that the absence of any trace mineral deposit from tap water, which would normally accumulate on a mirror surface within days of use, indicated the mirror had been cleaned within the preceding 12 to 24 hours. Coyle had cleaned the apartment the morning of the abduction. The team found 2 items he had not cleaned. The first was a single hair, discovered on the underside of the bathroom sink's drain cover, consistent in color and length with Coyle's physical description, and later confirmed by DNA comparison as his. The second was a partial shoe impression on the linoleum threshold between the kitchen and the hallway, left by a lug-soled boot, consistent with a men's size 11. Both items were documented and processed. Neither altered the trajectory of the investigation. But they confirmed he had been in the apartment, which itself was information. It established the connection between the lease name and a physical person who had physically inhabited the space. What was absent was its own category of evidence. No note, no communication device, no indication of co-conspirators, no documentation of a destination. A suspect who removes all navigable traces of a destination from a staging location is a suspect who is confident in the destination he has planned and does not need navigational aids. That behavioral reading, confidence rooted in prior reconnaissance, was in Schultz's briefing summary by 5 a.m. FBI Special Agent Diana Schultz arrived at the Phoenix Field Office Tactical Coordination Room at 4:02 a.m. She reviewed everything available in 6 minutes. Then she made an assessment about direction of travel. Surprise's residential grid terminated at 2 primary highway corridors, north toward Interstate 17 and the Flagstaff Metro, or east on State Route 60 and then Interstate 40. A suspect planning long-distance displacement, not a ransom scenario, given the absence of any contact, would prioritize access to a destination, concealment, isolation, distance. The I-17 corridor led north to Flagstaff, 65,000 people, dense hotel infrastructure, populated terrain. Interstate 40 went east into open country, Winslow, Holbrook, Gallup. Small towns. Isolated secondary roads. Properties off the utility grid. Schultz assessed, east. She had worked 8 prior infant abduction cases in a 14-year career at the Phoenix Field Office. In 6 of those cases, the suspect's direction of travel had been toward population density, toward concealment in crowds, toward the anonymity of urban hotel inventory. In the 2 cases that had gone differently, the suspects had gone to ground in isolated rural properties. Both of those cases had taken longer to resolve. Both had resolved. But the working assumption in any case like this one was that isolation was the harder problem, that a suspect who chose distance and remoteness over crowd concealment was a suspect who had prepared a specific location in advance. Improvised rural concealment left traces, a motel registration, a gas station receipt, a roadside camera. Prepared rural concealment meant the suspect was already where he intended to be before any alert system could reach that geography. She assessed east, and she knew what east meant. DPS deployed checkpoint units on I-40 at both Flagstaff and Winslow. 160 miles of open desert with one highway running through it. One vehicle, unconfirmed plate, 3.5 hours of darkness. At 4:15 a.m., Schultz later told the post-incident review board she assessed the probability of recovery as low. She was wrong, but not yet. The operations room at 4:30 a.m. had the quality that anyone who has worked those rooms will recognize. Not silence exactly, because there was continuous radio traffic and the low noise of workstations, but a particular density to the silence underneath the noise. The analysts at their terminals were not speaking to each other except when they had something. The detectives from Surprise PD, working the neighborhood canvas, were calling in at intervals. Every call that was not the call was its own small reduction in what remained possible. At 5:12 a.m., Sandra Farrow rang up a cash transaction at the Love's Travel Stop at mile marker 204 on Interstate 40, approximately 9 miles east of Winslow. Farrow was 41 years old. She had worked that specific truck stop for 6 years, the overnight shift for 4 of them. She had 3 children. Her youngest was 2. The customer was a white male, early to mid-40s, wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt. He walked directly to the infant and toddler section without pausing at any other display. He selected a canister of pre-mixed liquid formula, a pack of size 1 disposable diapers, a travel pack of baby wipes, and then crossed to the car accessories aisle and picked up a portable folding car seat, a newborn-rated model, sold flat. He paid in cash. He was at the register for less than 2 minutes. He did not make eye contact with Farrow. He looked at the exit. Several things registered to her in that window. The formula was pre-mixed, the kind you shake and pour directly, no water required. More expensive than powdered. Less common at highway truck stop purchases, where budget is typically a driver. A person in a genuine childcare emergency on the road typically buys whatever is cheapest. A person who selects pre-mixed at 5 in the morning is either in a specific kind of hurry, one where mixing formula is not an option, or unfamiliar with the full product range. The man's movements were controlled. He was not confused. He had found each item without hesitation. The second thing was the car seat. He had moved toward it with more certainty than he moved toward the formula, picked it up first in sequence, though last in the basket. A parent whose primary concern is a hungry newborn does not prioritize containment hardware over food. A person whose primary concern is secure transport prioritizes the seat. There is a line the case file almost doesn't capture. Farrow had no law enforcement training, no access to the Amber Alert broadcast. The geographic distribution had not yet reached Winslow area retail, and no authority to detain anyone. She had a feeling that she could not, at that moment, articulate in language. She stepped out from behind the register under the pretense of collecting stray carts near the entrance. She scanned the parking lot. Maroon Chevy Equinox. Rear quarter panel, passenger side. A partially peeled dealer sticker from a Flagstaff dealership. Adhesive residue still visible around the lifted vinyl edge. The kind of peel that happens within the first 2 to 3 years on an Arizona registered vehicle. But here, the residue was fresh-looking, recent. Coconino County Sheriff's Deputy Keith Moran was fueling his unit in the adjacent lane. Farrow walked to him. She said, "A man came in alone and bought formula, diapers, and a car seat in cash." She did not see a child. She did not hear one. Moran ran the plate. It returned a private party sale in Phoenix. The vehicle had been sold 11 days prior. The title transfer had not yet been filed with the Arizona Motor Vehicle Division. Under state law, Buyers have 15 business days to transfer registration following a private party purchase. At day 11, the plate still officially returned the prior owner, a retired schoolteacher in the Ahwatukee neighborhood with no criminal history and no connection to any active case. The gap was legal. The sale was real. The documentation existed. But the state's processing lag meant that the plate Moran ran was 11 days out of date. He called it in regardless. At the Phoenix field office, the call from Moran came through to a duty officer at 5:23 a.m. The duty officer passed it to Schultz's terminal at 5:27. In the 2 minutes between Moran logging the plate result and Schultz reading the transcript of the call, Moran had asked the overnight manager to preserve the interior camera footage from the prior 20 minutes. The manager had pulled it. Moran had confirmed the visual from the store camera: a single male, gray sweatshirt, no child visible, transaction by cash, product selection consistent with a newborn male. The Equinox had departed the lot at 5:15 a.m., heading east on I-40. The vehicle description and Farrow's account of the transaction reached Schultz's radio at 5:29 a.m. She cross-referenced it immediately. Drive time from Crestfield Loop in Surprise to mile marker 204 on I-40, east of Winslow, via State Route 60, and then east on the interstate, 189 miles. At highway speed with no stops, approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. A departure from the neighborhood between 2:40 and 2:50 a.m. was consistent with a 5:12 a.m. arrival at the Loves. The math closed within the window. Schultz made 2 calls. The first was to the Coconino County Sheriff's Office, requesting units on the service roads and secondary routes east of Winslow. The second was a coordination flag to the Marshals tactical element already staged on I-40. At 5:46 a.m., a DPS unit located the Equinox on a caliche service road 3.8 miles east of Winslow, partially screened by a stand of junipers at the edge of a decommissioned utility right-of-way. Engine off. No movement visible. A boarded double-wide mobile home sat at the end of the road. The DPS unit marked the position and withdrew without approaching. What 3 members of the investigation team, and only 3 at that point, knew was how Coyle had identified that specific trailer as his destination. The property had been listed on the same platform he had used to access the feed near the Reeves home. A property manager had advertised the double-wide in the spring of 2026, attempting to sublet it before a planned renovation. The listing had been deactivated after 2 months with no takers. But the photographs, interior shots of 3 rooms and an exterior establishing view showing the service road and the surrounding distance, remained in the platform's indexed archive, accessible through a search of the address. The rear bedroom photograph included a caption written by the listing agent: "Quiet and private, no neighbors within a quarter mile." Coyle had booked his secondary location the same way he had found Maya Reeves. No criminal network. No dark web interface. A keyword search from a motel room in Flagstaff weeks before the abduction. The platform's search function had returned the archived listing as a valid result. He had studied the room layout from the archived interior photographs. The 3 agents holding this detail had flagged it as a platform systemic risk at 3:15 a.m., before the Equinox had even been located, and were managing it as a parallel investigative line while voluntary platform cooperation was being sought. The platform's legal team agreed to cooperate before 5 a.m. without a subpoena. That cooperation was noted. Whether it affected their regulatory exposure was a question that, as of the date of this account, remained open. What most observers spent less time on, and what strikes you differently after going through the case file closely, is that the platform's internal access logs, which the voluntary cooperation produced, had not flagged Coyle's browsing behavior as anomalous in any automated sense. He had not exceeded any access threshold, not triggered any privacy alert, not violated any listed term of service. He had used the platform as it was designed to be used. The architecture had no mechanism to detect that its indexed residential camera feeds were being cross-referenced with public social media to build a surveillance profile of a private citizen. The architecture still doesn't. Schultz's team needed to confirm the infant was inside before committing a forced entry. The trailer showed no active utility connections, no power draw on the county grid, no gas meter active, no water service registered. Standard surveillance positions were not an option. Any visible approach from the service road risked exposure through the kitchen window on the trailer's west face. A thermal imaging drone pass was conducted at 7:14 a.m. It returned 2 heat signatures inside the structure. The first was adult-sized, concentrated in the kitchen area. The second was considerably smaller, located at the rear of the building, consistent with the rear bedroom in the archived listing photographs. The smaller signature was not moving. Schultz received that data at 7:22 a.m. She requested a second pass. It ran at 7:30 a.m. The same 2 signatures. The smaller one had shifted position, slightly, measurably, from the first pass. It was alive. The drone operator, a DPS unit trained on thermal imaging for wildfire reconnaissance, noted in the post-incident review that the second signature's heat profile was consistent with an infant, rather than, for instance, a small animal. The body mass reading and the specific thermal gradient at the head, the warmest point on a newborn, matched pediatric parameters in his reference data. He had noted this in his verbal report to the coordination unit at 7:33 a.m., with the caveat that the system was calibrated for wildfire detection rather than medical use. He had also said, "It reads like a baby." That informal phrasing appeared in the written summary of the call. It was passed up the coordination chain as written. The infant had not been fed since leaving the Reeves home. The formula Coyle had purchased at the Loves was still sealed. The agents reviewing the thermal data knew that dehydration in a 6-day-old operates on a compressed timeline. The window for safe recovery was not indefinite. Schultz authorized the breach for 9:17 a.m. Then, a problem surfaced. The site survey for the tactical approach had been built using satellite imagery from a commercial mapping service. The imagery was 11 months old. In the intervening period, the Caliche service road had been widened and regraded, likely during a utility company maintenance run on the adjacent right-of-way. The road that Schultz's approach map showed as a narrow single lane was, on the ground, approximately 40% wider. That shift changed the west side approach angle by roughly 30 feet. The position calculated for the west side element of the entry team placed 2 agents in a potential sightline from the trailer's kitchen window. The Marshals element lead identified the discrepancy during the final position check at 8:53 a.m. He had 12 minutes before the breach window. There was not enough time to relay the adjustment through the full command chain and receive confirmation. He moved the west side team by radio, using terrain landmarks, a specific juniper at the edge of the right-of-way, a utility marker post, the rut line of the original road, rather than grid coordinates. No acknowledgement protocol. 4 minutes before execution, he repositioned 2 agents without a formal coordination handshake. It worked. The adjusted positions held the west side approach below the kitchen window's sightline. But as the post-entry reconstruction confirmed, Coyle had not been at the kitchen window at that moment. He had been at the kitchen counter. The sightline had been, for those 4 minutes, irrelevant. The margin was a juniper tree and 11 months of outdated satellite imagery. 9:17 a.m. 6 agents from the Marshals' Sonoran Fugitive Task Force formed the entry stack at the rear bedroom door. A 4-agent FBI element held the kitchen approach from the north, targeting the one window on that face, confirmed in the thermal pass to be unboarded. 2 DPS units sealed the Equinox and the service road access point. Schultz gave the signal from the staging position 2.2 miles south via encrypted radio. The rear door took 1 application of the RAM. The frame around the latch was wood, softened by desert weather cycles, expansion and contraction over years without maintenance, and it gave on the first strike. Simultaneously, within a margin of 2 seconds, the kitchen entry came through the north window, low and fast. Darren Coyle was at the kitchen counter. He was holding the canister of pre-mixed formula from the Loves. Still sealed. Cap intact. When the kitchen entry team came through the window, he set the canister on the counter surface. He raised both hands. He did not speak. He was in a controlled takedown at 32 seconds from first entry and secured at 38. The rear bedroom entry team was through the door in the first second. The hallway inside the trailer ran 4 feet wide, linoleum floor, 2 doors on the left side. The first was a bathroom. The second was the rear bedroom. 1 agent took a position at the bathroom door under standard clearance protocol, while 2 others moved to the bedroom. The door was unlocked. The room was empty of furniture. A single boarded window on the east wall admitted no light. The agents worked by mounted tactical lights. In the rear bedroom, agents found the laundry basket against the east wall. The infant was inside, swaddled in the blue fleece blanket with the small bear print pattern, confirmed afterward as a shower gift that Maya Reeves had washed and folded and placed in the nursery 2 weeks before the birth. The corners of the blanket had been folded inward, edges tucked to minimize draft at the head and feet, the way a parent would fold it. Coyle had arranged it that way. 1 agent lifted the infant immediately, cradling the head. The standard check: responsiveness to light pressure, skin temperature, color at the lips. The skin was dry in the way that early dehydration presents, not the waxen quality of advanced stages, but dry, without the slight surface moisture of a normally hydrated newborn. The lips were dry. The fontanelle showed slight depression. But when the agent's gloved finger touched the infant's palm, the fingers closed around it. The grasp reflex was intact. It is an involuntary response, a brainstem function, not a voluntary act. But in that room, in that moment, it was what it was. The infant was conscious, responsive to sound. When agents lifted him from the basket, the cry was immediate and strong. The DPS paramedic unit staged 2 miles down the service road received the handoff at 9:26 a.m. The attending medic confirmed clinical dehydration. The fontanelle showed slight depression consistent with several hours without adequate fluid intake, but no signs of trauma, no respiratory distress, no abnormal core temperature. 9 hours and 1 minute after the 911 call from Crestfield Loop. The post-recovery investigation moved quickly on several tracks. Coyle was transported to Coconino County Sheriff's detention. Federal charges filed by the Maricopa County U.S. Attorney's Office included kidnapping with interstate transport of a minor, unlawful restraint, and concurrent Arizona state charges of burglary in the first degree. He was held without bail. His public defender entered a not guilty plea at the arraignment in late August. The case is expected to proceed to trial. The federal investigative line that remained active concerned two questions. First, whether Coyle had acted alone, or whether the platform methodology had been shared with him through any identifiable network. Second, whether the pattern of residential feed surveillance identified in the platform's access logs represented isolated behavior or a broader operational methodology in use by other individuals. The voluntary disclosure records covered 18 months of platform user data. Federal analysts identified 11 accounts displaying browsing behavior consistent with Coyle's pattern, extended access to residential camera feeds, cross-referenced with geographically associated social media content, from IP addresses inconsistent with the listed addresses of the posting users. 8 of those accounts were suspended by the platform within 24 hours of the disclosure. 3 have not been located. Donna Reeves had driven home from her overnight shift at 7:48 a.m. on August 2nd, approximately 90 minutes after the thermal pass confirmed the 2 signatures in the Winslow trailer and 70 minutes before the breach. She did not yet know her grandson had been taken when she pulled into the driveway. She learned both facts within 6 minutes of each other. That her grandson had been abducted and that he had been found. The notification was handled by a Maricopa County Victim Services Coordinator, which is departmental protocol in confirmed recovery cases. It means the worst information and the relief arrive together. A small procedural detail with significant human weight. The coordinator who made that notification had handled 43 victim contacts in the preceding year. She said afterward, in a debrief with her supervisor, that confirmed recovery notifications are not easier to deliver than the other kind. They are different in outcome. They are not different in the moment between sitting down across from someone and beginning to speak. The 6 minutes Donna Reeves sat in the driveway of her own home while a stranger told her what had happened to her family and what the outcome had been are not in the case file. They are not recoverable. They are part of what this case cost. Maya Reeves was at Flagstaff Medical Center when her son arrived from the service road. She had been transported there after giving her second formal statement to federal investigators at 6 a.m. A longer interview, 2 agents, the kind that works through everything again from the beginning, in more detail and more slowly, the kind where the detective you first spoke to at 4 in the morning is in a different room, and the agents across from you have a recorder and a typed protocol of questions. She was at the hospital by 8. She was in the room when the paramedics brought him in at 9:41 a.m. What was said in that room is not documented in the case file. Some things are outside the jurisdiction of documentation. Here is what the regulatory framework looks like in the aftermath of this case, and why it matters beyond Winslow. Coyle did not hack anything. He did not access a restricted database, purchase information through a broker, or use any mechanism that required circumventing a legal or security barrier. He used a consumer platform, accessed publicly indexed content, and cross-referenced it with publicly available social media. That methodology required no technical skill, no criminal network, no investment beyond a motel room, and a month of platform access. The listing that first gave him a view of Maya Reeves's home was not removed from the platform's archive until 72 hours after his arrest, when a federal tech analyst specifically requested its deletion. It had been deactivated, removed from active search results, but the underlying data remained accessible through a direct URL. Unpopular read, and one that's worth saying plainly, The platform's voluntary cooperation is not a substitute for criminal liability. The feed was not a privacy violation in any technical sense, the platform's own terms of service recognized. By the platform's legal framework, it was a normal listing. That normal listing was the proximate condition that enabled 61 days of surveillance and the planning of a federal kidnapping. A company that monetizes indexed residential camera feeds and retains archived footage from deactivated listings without access restrictions is not a passive infrastructure provider in that chain of events. Regulatory cooperation after the fact is not the same as structural accountability before it. The platform has not been charged with any crime. Its archive retention policy has not been publicly revised. The congressional subcommittee taking up the platform liability question in September has been provided with the access log data from the Coyle investigation, along with the logs of the 11 additional accounts identified by federal analysts. That data is not, as of this account, in the public record. What the subcommittee does with it, whether it moves toward a structural disclosure requirement for archived residential feeds, whether it defines a retention threshold that triggers mandatory deletion, whether it constructs a liability framework that reaches the platform rather than only the individual who misused its product, is a policy question, with a concrete case now behind it. Is this the kind of structural risk that only becomes legible after a case like this makes the mechanism visible? Or was the failure preventable, and if so, by whom? The platform liability question is going before a congressional subcommittee in September. What happened on Crestfield Loop is not abstract policy. There is one other thread still open. Among the 11 accounts identified in the platform's access logs, federal analysts have flagged browsing patterns in at least 4 cases from other southwestern states where young mothers were surveillanced through residential feed cross-referencing in the months before Coyle's arrest. None of those cases resulted in an abduction. 2 resulted in criminal trespass charges that were handled at the local level, without the residential platform connection ever being established. 1 resulted in a restraining order. The 4th is still open. Whether Coyle developed his methodology independently, or whether it was shared through any identifiable community of individuals with similar targeting behavior, is the thread investigators are still pulling. The platform cooperation produced data. The data produced the 11 accounts. 3 of those accounts have not been located. The platform's search architecture, which made those accounts possible, remains operational. The infant was discharged from Flagstaff Medical Center on August 4, 2026, evaluated as clinically healthy, no lasting effects from the exposure. Drop a comment if you want us to follow this case through trial. There is one piece of the platform's cooperation disclosure that the U.S. Attorney's Office declined to address publicly, and if it surfaces in discovery, it changes the picture. The case against Darren Coyle proceeds. The platform has not been charged. 3 accounts remain unlocated. The archive is still in